I cried reading this book, I cried talking about this book for my video, and I cried again when I edited this video. Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Daniela, and today's video is a little bit of a weird one because originally this was meant to be part of a weekly reading vlog, but I ended up having so much footage that I decided to make this its own video. This is a spoiler-filled video. In fact, I am going to talk you through some of the things that happen in this book and tell you what in general happens throughout the book. So if you have no interest in reading A Little Life and you want to know what happens, then keep watching. The first portion of this video is me talking you through the characters in A Little Life and what happens throughout the story. I'll share with you some of my favourite passages from the book and why I thought they were worth reading. The last portion of the book, I did film myself reading the last 100 pages of this book. And if you've read this book, you will know that there are tears aplenty to be had reading the last 100 pages of this book. So if you want to see me distraught, crying my eyes out reading A Little Life, then this is your chance. If you have any sensitivities to any content that could be included in this book, I would highly recommend that you look up the trigger warnings before watching this video. Please take care of yourself and please enjoy. Daniela, what book could you possibly have been reading for over 6 weeks? I've been reading A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. This book is a lot. It's over 700 pages, but the text is very small on each page, so I feel like it's taken me twice as long as a normal 700 page book to read. It's hard to read, not just because of the contents, but because the first third of the book is incredibly boring to me. It's a lot of setup, it's a lot of introductions. I feel like there's a lot of conversations that you witness that you don't need to witness. You meet characters that aren't really important to the plot. It's a lot. And then on top of that, you have the multitude of content warnings within this book. Horrific information, horrific scenes. It's not a fun read. I have like 100 pages left of this book. Yet another book that Andy has conned me into reading, saying it is really, really good, and I'm just kind of like, eh. I think for me this is going to be a 3 stars, but I'm not going to make that decision until the end. I think this book is definitely overhyped. I will also say, this might sound bad, I don't feel like this book is as bad as some people have made it out to be. Having now read the majority of, I mean, I haven't got right to the end, unless something like even worse. What could possibly be worse?
Honey, you've got a big storm coming.
I'm gonna be kind. I'm gonna tell you what this book is about so that you don't have to read it. Because I feel like the amount of time and effort this takes, I don't feel like people need to read this book. I really don't. I will read out some scenes that I believe were worth reading, were worth the effort, but they're few and far between. Let's begin. So in A Little Life, we follow mainly 4 friends who have met during their college years. Our main character is called Jude St. Francis. He's a little bit mysterious. His friends don't know much about his past, and that is because Jude doesn't like to talk about his past. He's a very secretive person. He doesn't like being touched. He doesn't like being asked questions about his past. He is a very self-deprecating person. He self-sabotages a lot. When bad things happen to him, he believes he deserves them. I feel like for me, a lot of what made this book more horrific was the character of Jude being so self-deprecating, so self-sabotaging. He doesn't believe that he deserves good things. Like, that for me was one of the hardest things about reading this book. I really struggled with that side of the character work in this book. As the book goes on, we learn more and more about Jude's past, and things are unveiled to us why Jude is the way he is. Jude experiences a lot of violence during his lifetime, not just in his childhood. He is abused by many people, and because of that he struggles with a lot of mental health problems. He is taught at a young age to cut himself to cope with what is happening to him. That carries on throughout his entire adult life. He does at one point during the book decide to take his own life. It is very heavy. I don't feel like people need to read this book. I really don't. Am I glad I have read it? I feel like I could have been happy having not read this. I really do. I suppose like the nice part of this book is that despite Jude having this horrific childhood and all of these mental health problems, he somehow does manage to end up doing very well in school. He ends up getting a good job. He ends up being very successful in the workplace. He enjoys his work. He eventually ends up with a family and a good circle of friends around him. He has a doctor who cares deeply for his well-being, and there are some nice parts of Jude's life, but throughout all of it, Jude still doesn't think he deserves things, and also he struggles physically because something does happen to him which causes him lifelong injuries and lifelong problems with infections. There's a lot of struggle. Like I said, I do have 100 pages of this left, so I don't know how it ends. That's a basic summary of what you are in for during this book. So I have 5 tabs so far. These are the bits from the book that I thought were good writing. They made me feel things. They were very evocative. You may notice there is one little red tab here. I very much struggled with this section. I got very angry at this section of the book. I got very upset. I felt very emotional. This was the most distressing part of this book for me, but also the writing was so good. The way that they delivered this inner monologue for Jude during this scene was fantastic. The actual event that is happening is fucking horrific. The actual writing is so good. The prep work that was done for this section to be what it is, I have to give it to Hanya Yanagihara. That's a piece of work. I'll get to that in a moment, but our first tab, this is from the perspective of a character called Harold. Harold actually is, I think he starts out as one of Jude's teachers, but he does end up becoming his adoptive father, which is lovely. Harold is very nice. So we have Harold and Julia, who are a couple, and they do end up adopting Jude in his 30s, which is interesting, but also very, very special for Jude. But once again, he does have that problem where he doesn't think he deserves it. He thinks something is going to go wrong. He thinks that they're going to reject him. He feels like they're not going to want him anymore, that they're making a big mistake, and that they're going to regret their decision. More on that later. For now, this is from Harold's perspective. Harold has previously lost a child, and this is kind of about being a parent and the feelings surrounding having children. I feel like this section is very honest, and I feel like this is something that most people wouldn't want to admit, but people probably do feel this way. I do love things in books where it really highlights human emotions and our fears and our hopes and just things that more than likely everyone feels. This is one of those moments, and it's from Harold's perspective. And he says, "Let me tell you 2 other things I learned. The first is that it doesn't matter how old that child is, or when or how he became yours. Once you decide to think of someone as your child, something changes. And everything you have previously enjoyed about them, everything you have previously felt for them, is preceded first by that fear. It's not biological, it's something extra biological, less a determination to ensure the survival of one's genetic code, and more a desire to prove oneself inviolable to the universe's fates and challenges, to triumph over the things that want to destroy what's yours. The second thing is this. When your child dies, you feel everything you'd expect to feel. Feelings so well documented by so many others that I won't even bother to list them here, except to say that everything that's written about mourning is all the same. And it's all the same for a reason, because there is no real deviation from the text. Sometimes you feel more of one thing and less of another, and sometimes you feel them out of order, and sometimes you feel them for a longer time or a shorter time, but the sensations are always the same. But here's what no one says. When it's your child, a part of you, a very tiny but nonetheless unignorable part of you, also feels relief. Because finally, the moment you have been expecting, been dreading, been preparing yourself for since the day you became a parent has come. Ah, you tell yourself, it's arrived, here it is. And after that, you have nothing to fear again." I might pop some bloopers at the end of this video of me trying to read these sections because, like, they get to me. I get so emotional reading them. That was the first passage in this book that I really felt was really, really well written. Next, we have a section from JB's perspective. His full name is John Baptiste. He is one of Jude's friends from college, and this is kind of after college. This is later on in life when people are kind of starting to drift apart a little bit. Everything's not as it once was. You're not having the same amount of fun that you used to have, and you're kind of thinking about your life and how good it used to be, and how you kind of like, you know, reminiscing about like why is it not like this anymore. And so this is from his perspective, and it says, everyone had been so much more entertaining then. What had happened? Age, he guessed, and with it, jobs, money, children. The things to forestall death, the things to ensure one's relevance, the things to comfort and provide context and content. The march forward, one dictated by biology and convention, that not even the most irreverent mind could withstand. I really like that part. I feel like that, you know, it does sum up. We're kind of like in this cog that is turning, and we have been placed on this wheel, and we are just to follow the wheel and do what is expected of us. We're supposed to get a job, we're supposed to buy a house, we're supposed to have children, and it's like it's all laid out for us, and we're kind of pushed towards that path. I personally don't like that. I don't like this preset path that has been laid out for every single person. So once you're into your 20s or your 30s, you have children, and then that's the next 20 years of your life becomes working and raising children. If you have children at the beginning of your 30s, that is it until your 50s. Like, that is your life set out for you for another 20 years. And then as soon as you hit your 50s, the prime time in your life from 30 to 50 years old, it's gone. It's over. That was more an observation of life and the life that is set out before us. And then we have, the worst. Do I go to the worst bit next, or do I go to the happier bits? Okay, we'll do the worst bit, because then we can have some happiness afterwards. Throughout the book, Jude has conversations, or is privy to conversations, with various mathematics professors. There is a lot of like build up and a lot of prep work for this, and the mathematics and the axiom of equality, which is what this section is called. So the axiom of equality, as far as I understand it, is like a theory within mathematics. That's all I'm going to say before reading this section, and that's as simply as I can understand it. But this section is pretty horrific. Jude ends up in a relationship with a man who is violent with Jude in more ways than one. I can't remember if they have already broken up at this point, or if they're like on the verge of breaking up. But Jude, being the self-deprecating character that he is, believes that he deserves everything that Caleb, this partner, has been doing to him while they have been together. He feels like this is just what happens because this is the type of people he attracts. One of his previous tutors, Dr. Cashin, had mentioned the axiom of equality and said that that was a good one. We have an evening where Jude is out with Harold, his adoptive father, and they are out somewhere in a restaurant, and Caleb approaches them, and Jude immediately starts behaving differently, and Harold's kind of confused, like, who's this man? Like, why are you kind of cowering? Why do you look so uncomfortable? And this man is basically awful to him in front of Harold, and basically tells Harold, oh yeah, I'm his boyfriend. Harold doesn't know that Jude has a partner at this point, so Harold's a bit shocked. And it kind of ends with Harold telling Caleb to get out, go away from us now. And then Jude returns home, and it turns out that Caleb, I believe, has got the keys to his apartment copied, or has a key to the apartment, and when he gets home, Caleb is waiting for him. Remember, Jude has issues with his legs from a previous accident. He does use a wheelchair sometimes, and I think this is one of the periods where he is using his wheelchair, and he comes home and Caleb attacks him, strips him naked, and he puts him at the top of this flight of stairs that there is access to from Jude's apartment. And it's a very dark set of stairs that Jude doesn't use. They've previously made the joke about how terrifying and dark and horrible this set of stairs is. I'm not going to tell you everything that Caleb does, but in this particular section, Jude has just been kicked by Caleb, and I'm talking, Caleb has done a run-up and kicked Jude down the stairs. And this is Jude's inner monologue as he is flying down these stairs. So it says, the axiom of equality states that x always equals x. It assumes that if you have a conceptual thing named x, that it must always be equivalent to itself, that it has a uniqueness about it, that it is in possession of something so irreducible that we must assume it is absolutely, unchangeably equivalent to itself for all time, that its very elementalness can never be altered, but it is impossible to prove. Always, absolutes, nevers, these are the words, as much as numbers, that make up the world of mathematics. Not everyone liked the axiom of equality. Dr. Lee had once called it coy and twee and a fan dance of an axiom. But he had always appreciated how elusive it was, how the beauty of the equation itself would always be frustrated by the attempts to prove it. It was the kind of axiom that could drive you mad, that could consume you, that could easily become an entire life. But now he knows for certain how true the axiom is, because he himself, his very life, has proven it. The person I was will always be the person I am, he realizes. The context may have changed. He may be in this apartment, and he may have a job that he enjoys and that pays him well, and he may have parents and friends he loves. He may be respected in court, he may even be feared, but fundamentally, he is the same person. A person who inspires disgust, a person meant to be hated. And in that microsecond that he finds himself suspended in the air, between the ecstasy of being aloft and the anticipation of his landing, which he knows will be terrible, he knows that x will always equal x. No matter what he does, or how many years he moves away from the monastery, from Brother Luke, no matter how much he earns, or how hard he tries to forget. It is the last thing he thinks as his shoulder cracks down upon the concrete, and the world for an instant jerks blessedly away from beneath him. X equals x, he thinks. X equals x. X equals x. I feel a bit traumatized by this book, to be honest. Like, when I'm reading that section, I could feel a lump in my throat. It's awful. Okay, so the next section is from Willem's perspective. So Willem is another one of Jude's friends from college, but later on in life, Willem realizes that he has feelings for Jude, and Willem and Jude end up in a relationship. And throughout their relationship, obviously, Jude has his struggles with his health and his well-being, and I just thought this section from Willem's perspective regarding Jude's health and the hope he has for Jude's health was really, really lovely. So it starts like this. You're dreaming of miracles, Willem, Idris would say if he knew what he was thinking. And he knew he was. But then again, he would think, what about his life? And about Jude's life too? Wasn't it a miracle? He should have stayed in Wyoming. He should have been a ranch hand himself. Jude should have wound up where? In prison? Or in a hospital? Or dead? Or worse? But they hadn't. Wasn't it a miracle that someone who was basically unexceptional could live a life in which he made millions, pretending to be other people, that in that life, that person would fly from city to city, would spend his days having his every need fulfilled, working in artificial contexts in which he was treated like the potentate of a small corrupt country? Wasn't it a miracle to be adopted at 30, to find people who loved you so much that they wanted to call you their own? Wasn't it a miracle to have survived the unsurvivable? Wasn't friendship its own miracle? The finding of another person who made the entire lonely world seem somehow less lonely. Wasn't this house, this beauty, this comfort, this life a miracle? And so who could blame him for hoping for one more? For hoping that despite knowing better, that despite biology and time and history, that they would be the exception. That what happened to other people with Jude's sort of injury wouldn't happen to him. That even with all that Jude had overcome, he might overcome just one more thing. So that was Willem hoping for Jude that his life would not go down the route that the doctors expect it to go down, which is kind of inevitable. But Willem is just thinking, we've had all of these miracles, why can't we have one more?
This book's not worth reading.
Gets emotional after every paragraph. No, seriously though, if you want to read it, but I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't. These are just the highlights. The things that have made it worth reading, but there aren't many. There is a lot of other book to get through to get the benefit of reading these parts. It's a big investment. Even later on in Jude's life, Jude is suffering with fevers. During these fevers, he's suffering with infections and fevers. And during the fevers, he has like hallucinations, dreams. And when he wakes up, he kind of struggles to snap back to reality, to kind of differentiate what really happened because the dreams are so vivid. This section is Jude waking up after one of these dreams. Sometimes the dreams are so vivid, so real, that it takes minutes, an hour for him to return to his life, for him to convince himself that the life of his consciousness is in fact real life, his real life. Sometimes he wakes so far from himself that he can't even remember who he is. Where am I? He asks, desperate, and then, who am I? Who am I? And then he hears, so close to his ear that it is as if the voice is originating from inside his own head, Willem's whispered incantation. You are Jude St. Francis. You are my oldest, dearest friend. You are the son of Harold Stein and Julia Altman. You are the friend of Malcolm Irving, of Jean-Baptiste Marion, of Richard Goldfarb, of Andy Contractor, of Lucian Voigt, of Citizen Van Straten, of Rhodes Arrowsmith, of Elijah Cosma, of Phaedra de los Santos, of the Henry Youngs. You are a New Yorker. You live in Soho. You volunteer for an arts organisation. You volunteer for a food kitchen. You are a swimmer. You are a baker. You are a cook. You are a reader. You have a beautiful voice, though you never sing anymore. You're an excellent pianist. You're an art collector. You write me lovely messages when I'm away. You are patient. You are generous. You are the best listener I know. You are the smartest person I know in every way. You're the bravest person I know in every way. You're a lawyer. You're the chair of the litigation department at Rosen, Pritchard and Klein. You love your job. You work hard at it. You're a mathematician. You're a logician. You've tried to teach me again and again. You were treated horribly. You came out on the other end. You were always you. On and on Willem talks, chanting him back to himself, and in the daytime, sometimes days later, he remembers pieces of what Willem has said, and holds them close to him, as much as for what he said as for what he didn't, for how he hadn't defined him. But in the nighttime, he is too terrified. He is too lost to recognise this. His panic is too real, too consuming. And who are you? He asks, looking at the man who is holding him, who is describing someone he doesn't recognise, someone who seems like such an enviable, beloved person. Who are you? The man has an answer to this question as well. I'm Willem Ragnarsson, he says, and I will never let you go. I feel like this book has ruined my life. This is probably one of the nicest parts of this book. I am sorry this section was so long. If you were interested in reading A Little Life, there we have it. Those are the things that I thought were worth reading in A Little Life, but I must say those probably don't have the same emotional effect on a person if you haven't read the rest of the book. So, I don't know. Let me know what you think of the writing in this book. Those sections in particular I thought were so well written, so evocative. You can see me struggling to read them. But obviously there is a hell of a lot of build up to get to feeling all these emotions. Those are just my favourite parts, bits that I thought were really well done. There could be more. I know there are parts that Andy likes that didn't affect me as much as they affected him. It really is up to you whether you want to put yourself through this, whether you want to try and read this. I will say it's probably going to take up a lot of your time. It's not something you can just read. I couldn't anyway. I couldn't just read this day after day. I've had to take breaks from reading this book. There's been times when I've had to put it down. There has been days and days where I've avoided picking it back up because I don't want to torture myself anymore. Hopefully you have enough information now to make the decision on whether you want to try and read this or not, and that's entirely up to you. But I do have 100 pages left and I'm gonna try and read them. We just had a crash out of nowhere, a car crash. There was no build up. I was not expecting that. That's like the least amount of build up to something happening ever. Last section. Willem is dead. he got hit by a truck whilst driving. I feel like I've been hit by a truck. This is so depressing. We're now about 6 months after Willem's death. Jude just put on one of Willem's old shirts, but didn't put his arms through the sleeves and wrapped the sleeves around him, so it was like Willem is hugging him. You know, like, a little bit earlier when I said, I don't see what could possibly happen that could be even worse than the rest of this book. 5 pages. I was 5 pages away from Willem getting hit by a truck when I said, it's not going to get any worse. It could possibly. Help. Honestly though, I was not expecting that at all. I can't even begin to explain how out of the blue that is. I've never been reading something so casually, being like, oh, la, 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 everything's great, la, 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 oh, this is fine. And then just been like, fuck you. Honestly, I've never been so shocked. I got like halfway through a sentence and I just went, I didn't catch that bit on camera. So I got to a certain word, a certain sentence, and I dropped the book and I was like, I was just dumbfounded. And then I pressed record and I went back and started reading again and then read further. And that is when the tears erupted. So out of the blue. So out of the blue. I'm gonna carry on reading this nightmare. I have finished. This is the most depressing book ever. That's it. Putting this video out for you guys is my final experience with A Little Life, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of glad it's over. If you read A Little Life and you want to talk to me about it, feel free to do so in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. If you did, as always, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I will see you next time. The moment you have been expecting, been dreading, been preparing yourself for, I got you. You write me. He remembers pieces of what? Oscar, you butt.